Marcus had always thought that alien cities would feel cold and strange, filled with incomprehensible structures and unfriendly faces. Yet, when he walked through the shining streets of Kelara's world, he felt a strange mixture of awe and unease. Towering spires curved like blades toward the sky, their surfaces glowing faintly with patterns that shifted like living light. The air carried a faint hum, the resonance of power coursing through hidden energy veins beneath the city. For many humans, this place was overwhelming. For Marcus, an engineer assigned to maintain the fragile new alliance between humans and the Illyrians, it was fascinating. He had been allowed to explore the capital on his rest days, though most humans preferred to stay near their quarters. But Marcus was curious by nature, drawn not just to machines but to the people who used them. He wanted to understand what lay behind the polished armor and regal manners of the Illyrians. While most of his kind saw them as untouchable warriors, Marcus wondered if they were really so different inside. That curiosity, more than anything else, often led him into places he was not expected to be. On one such day, Marcus found himself walking past a hall that glowed brighter than the rest. It was quieter than the crowded marketplaces, its entrance, guarded only by two statues carved from stone. A low vibration echoed from inside like the sound of heavy metal striking against the floor. Driven by instinct, Marcus stepped through the doorway, not knowing what he would find. The sight before him stopped him in his tracks. The hall was vast and circular, its walls lined with racks of alien weapons. At its center stood a figure moving, with precise grace, her body covered in elaborate armor that shimmered like liquid metal. She struck with a long spear, her movement so fast that arcs of light followed each thrust. The spear slammed into the ground, leaving cracks in the reinforced floor. Even through the alien armor, Marcus could tell that this was no ordinary soldier. The way she carried herself spoke of discipline, authority, and power. He realized who she must be. The princess of the Illyrians, heir to the throne, and rumored to be one of the most skilled warriors of her people. Marcus should have turned back. No human had the right to watch her training uninvited. Yet he stood frozen, captivated not by her beauty or her armor, but by the sheer intensity with which she moved. There was no audience here, no court watching, no generals applauding. She was training alone, as if fighting invisible battles. The clash of her spear stopped suddenly. The armored head turned sharply in his direction. Even through the glowing visor, Marcus felt the weight of her eyes on him. "You!" Her voice rang out, amplified by the armor. It was strong, commanding, but with an edge of surprise. "Why do you stand there?" Marcus blinked. His first instinct was to apologize and leave. But something in her tone was not anger, more curiosity. He swallowed and forced his voice to remain steady. "I was just watching. I didn't mean to intrude." She tilted her head slightly. The armor shifted with a soft hiss, adjusting, as if alive. "Most of your kind would not dare stand in silence while I train. They either bow or flee." Marcus gave a small, almost awkward smile. "Well, I'm not most of my kind." For a long moment, the hall was quiet. Then she took a step forward, the sound of her armored boots echoing across the chamber. Up close, Marcus could see the fine engravings on the plates, glowing faintly with alien energy. She stood taller than him, her presence filling the space. "You know who I am," she said, not as a question but as a statement. "Yes," Marcus admitted. "Princess Kelara. And yet you watch me as if I am only another soldier." Marcus hesitated. He could feel his heart pounding, but he forced himself to hold her gaze. "Because in that moment, that's what you looked like. Someone working hard, pushing yourself." I forgot about the title. The princess was silent for a moment. No one had ever spoken to her in such a way. Not in the training hall, not in the palace. She was used to reverence, fear, or admiration. But this human's words carried none of those. Instead, they carried honesty. Her voice lowered slightly, the sharpness replaced by curiosity. "You are bold for a fragile creature." Marcus shrugged, lightly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just see things differently." She regarded him carefully. then raised her spear and planted it into the ground beside her. The glow of her armor dimmed slightly as she spoke again. "Then stay, human. If you wish to watch, watch closely. Few outsiders have seen what lies within these walls." Marcus nodded, uncertain where this path would lead, but unable to turn away. Something told him that this meeting was only the beginning and that beneath her gleaming armor, there was far more to the alien princess than anyone dared to believe. Marcus had never felt so out of place, yet strangely calm at the same time. The princess's presence should have made him nervous, but instead, her curiosity gave him courage. She returned to the center of the training hall, lifting her spear, once more her movements like flowing water turning into steel. Marcus stayed where he was, watching, though now he was careful to study not only her skill, but also the rhythm of her steps, the way her armor responded to every motion. It was less a suit and more an extension of her body, alive with energy. Kelaira struck at invisible enemies, spinning and thrusting, each blow accompanied by a hum of power. Then, without warning, she stopped mid-motion and turned toward Marcus. Again, her voice came through the mask, firm and sharp. "Human," she said, "you seem unafraid. Most would tremble." Marcus gave a small shrug. "Maybe I should be, but I'm more curious than afraid." Her visor tilted as if she were studying him through its glow. Then, with deliberate slowness, she lowered the spear until its sharp tip rested gently against the floor. "Curious," she repeated, her tone shifting. "Then let us test that curiosity." Marcus frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" Kelaira straightened her stance. "You watch me fight. Now you will face me. No weapons, no armor, only yourself." The words struck him like a sudden challenge he had never expected. A part of him wanted to laugh, because the idea of fighting a trained warrior princess in armor was ridiculous. But she was serious, and he could sense that refusing might insult her. He took a slow breath. "If that's what you want, I'll try. But I don't think it will end well for me." A faint sound came from her helmet, something between a chuckle and a hum. "We will see." She moved to the center of the hall and gestured with her hand. The armor plates along her legs shifted, with a hiss as if adjusting their balance. Marcus stepped forward, removing the light jacket he wore and tossing it aside. He stood ready, though he had no formal training in combat beyond basic drills. His advantage was not strength, but adaptability. The princess raised her hand. "Begin." Marcus circled her slowly, looking for any opening. He knew he could not overpower her, but he could observe. He darted forward suddenly, trying to grab her arm. In an instant, she twisted aside, her armor moving with supernatural speed, and Marcus found himself stumbling past her. She did not strike, but instead let him recover. "Quick," she said calmly, "but not enough." Marcus gritted his teeth. He tried again, feinting to the left before lunging to the right. This time he managed to touch the side of her arm before she deflected him with a light push that sent him sliding back. The strength behind even that simple motion was incredible. Again and again Marcus attacked, and again she avoided or redirected him. Yet something unexpected happened. He did not fall immediately. His persistence, his creativity, and his refusal to quit seemed to surprise her. Finally, after a long exchange, Marcus bent over, breathing hard, sweat dripping from his forehead. Kelaira stood tall, untouched, her armor glowing faintly. She lowered her hand. "Enough," she said. "You cannot defeat me, but you lasted longer than most without protection." Marcus laughed weakly, catching his breath. "That's not really comforting." But Kelaira tilted her head again, her tone almost thoughtful. "You are different. You do not fear failure. You move without hesitation, even knowing the outcome." "Why?" Marcus straightened, still panting. He thought for a moment, then answered honestly. "Because that's what it means to be human. We're fragile. We don't have claws or armor or strength like you. But if we always gave up before trying, we wouldn't have survived at all. We're still here because we take risks, even when we shouldn't." For a moment, silence filled the hall. The princess stood very still, her glowing visor fixed on him. Then slowly she lifted her hand to her helmet. The armor hissed and the visor rose, revealing a glimpse of her eyes, sharp, golden, and filled with something Marcus could not quite name. Her voice was softer now, no longer amplified by the mask. "Curious," she said again, but this time there was no challenge in the word. Instead, it carried a trace of wonder. Marcus felt his chest tighten at the sight. He realized that beneath all the metal, all the titles, there was someone who wanted to be understood. Someone who perhaps felt as trapped by the armor as she was empowered by it. She lowered the visor once more, sealing herself behind the mask. "You may return tomorrow, human. We will speak again." Marcus nodded, still catching his breath. "I'll be here." As he left the hall, he felt a strange sense of excitement. The princess had tested him, and though he had not won, he had not failed either. Something had changed between them. For the first time, Kailira had looked at him not as an outsider or a fragile creature, but as someone worth noticing. And that, Marcus realized, was only the beginning. Marcus returned to the training hall the next day, though part of him wondered if the princess had only been testing him once and would not appear again. The city was bright with the morning glow, its towers casting long shadows across the streets, and yet Marcus felt a heavier weight than usual on his shoulders. He had faced many challenges in his life, broken machines, difficult assignments, and the endless struggle of proving humanity's worth among stronger races. But this felt different. He was about to face not a battle of weapons, but a meeting of two worlds. When he stepped through the tall doorway, she was already there. Kailira stood in the center of the hall, armor gleaming faintly in the shifting light. She was not training this time. Instead, she seemed to be waiting, her spear resting upright at her side. The silence of the hall carried her presence like a living force. "You returned," she said as his footsteps echoed closer. "I said I would," Marcus replied simply. Her visor tilted, as though she were studying his face. Then she gestured to the edge of the hall. "Sit. We will not fight today." Marcus obeyed, lowering himself to the smooth floor. The princess remained standing, her tall figure framed by the glow of the alien lights. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Kailira broke the silence. "You said something yesterday," she began. "That humans survive because you take risks. That you continue even when you cannot win." Marcus nodded. "Yes, it's not just survival. It's who we are. We don't know when to quit, even when logic says we should." Her armored hand touched the spear beside her, almost absent-mindedly. "That is, strange to me. My people fight only when there is certainty of victory. We do not waste strength." "That sounds smart," Marcus admitted. "But it also means you might miss things. Some of our greatest victories came when we had no chance at all. Sometimes it's the impossible fight that defines us." Her visor dimmed slightly, the glow fading as if she were lost in thought. "To fight when defeat is certain, it is both foolish and brave. I do not know if I admire it or question your sanity." Marcus chuckled softly. Both are probably true. For the first time, he thought he heard something close to laughter echo faintly through her helmet. It was short and quiet, but it broke the heavy air between them. Kailira turned toward him fully now. "Why did you not fear me yesterday? Do you not understand what I am? I am heir to a throne. I have crushed warriors twice your size. Even armored generals bow when I enter a room. And yet, you looked at me as if I were—" She paused, her voice lowering. "As if I were only a person." Marcus leaned back slightly, his expression calm. "Because that's what you are. A person. The armor, the title, the throne. Those are things around you. But underneath all that, you're still someone who trains, someone who thinks, someone who feels. That's what I saw." The princess was silent again. The words hung in the hall, sharper than any weapon. No one had ever said that to her. Not her council, not her soldiers, not even her family. To everyone else, she was the armor, the strength, the image of perfection. But this human, fragile and unarmored, had spoken to her as though she were something else entirely. After a long silence, she moved closer, her footsteps heavy but measured. "You speak as if you know me," she said softly. "I don't," Marcus admitted. "Not yet. But I'd like to." Her golden eyes flashed faintly behind the visor. She said nothing, but she lowered her spear once more and sat across from him, the metal of her armor folding gracefully as if it had been designed for elegance as well as power. For the next hour they spoke. Kelaira asked him questions about humanity, about the strange blue world that circled a yellow star far from her empire. Marcus told her about rainstorms, about oceans that stretched beyond the horizon, about deserts where the air shimmered like fire. He described the way humans built cities not just for survival but for beauty, even though those cities were fragile compared to Illyrian spires. In return, Kelaira shared pieces of her world. She told him how every child of her race was tested for strength and skill, how her armor had been given to her not as a gift but as a burden she was expected to carry without fault. She confessed that sometimes the weight of being perfect felt heavier than the metal plates themselves. Marcus listened quietly. When she finished, he said, "You don't have to be perfect all the time. No one can." Her head turned sharply, as though the idea was completely foreign. "If I show weakness, my people will lose faith. My armor is not just protection. It is a symbol. It tells them I will never falter." "Maybe," Marcus said gently. "But symbols don't inspire forever. People do. Sometimes showing that you're real makes others stronger than pretending you're unbreakable." Kelaira's visor dimmed again and she did not answer right away, but Marcus could feel her thinking, weighing his words carefully. At last she rose, her armor unfolding as she stood tall once again. "You are unusual, human. You speak without fear. Perhaps that is your strength." Marcus smiled faintly. "Or maybe it's just stubbornness." She gave a small nod. "Return again tomorrow. There is more I wish to understand." Marcus stood as well, feeling the weight of the conversation settle inside him. As he left the hall, he realized that the cracks in her mask were beginning to show, not in her armor, but in the walls she had built around herself. For the first time, the alien princess had shared more than strength. She had shared doubt. And that, Marcus thought, was the first step toward something far greater. Marcus returned to the hall for the third day with a strange mix of anticipation and calm. He did not know why the princess kept asking him back, but he knew it was not by accident. Something in their conversation seemed to open a door neither of them had expected. The palace guards at the entrance no longer looked at him with suspicion. Instead, they stepped aside as if his presence had been approved at the highest level. That in itself felt like a quiet acknowledgement. Inside, Kelaira was not training this time, nor was she standing in her usual stance of command. Instead, she sat on one of the wide stone benches along the wall, her spear leaning nearby. The armor still covered her body, shining faintly with its silver-blue light, but the way she rested her hands in her lap gave the impression of someone lost in thought. "You are later today," she said as Marcus walked in. "I had to finish some work in the human quarter," Marcus explained with a small smile. "Machines don't repair themselves." Kelaira tilted her visor as though amused. "I wonder if you see everything as machines, even people." Marcus shook his head as he sat down across from her. "Machines I can take apart and fix. People are more complicated, but sometimes they're easier to understand if you stop pretending they're perfect." The words made her fall silent for a moment. Finally, she spoke in a quieter voice. "You speak often of imperfection, yet where you come from, is that not considered weakness?" Marcus leaned back, his eyes following the glowing lines etched into her armor. "Maybe sometimes. But the truth is, weakness is what makes us connect to each other. If we never showed it, no one would ever help anyone. That's why we hide behind masks, because we're scared of being judged. But when we take them off, We let people see who we really are. That's where trust begins. The princess lowered her head slightly, and her armored fingers tapped gently against her leg as if she were considering each word. My armor, she admitted softly, is my mask. It is more than protection. It is an image, a promise. To my people, I must be flawless, stronger than anyone, unshaken. If they saw doubt in me, their own courage would falter. Marcus studied her carefully. This was the first time she had spoken so openly about her burden. He chose his next words with care. Then your people don't really see you. They see the armor. But you're more than that. You're the one who chooses to wear it, not the armor itself. Her head lifted, golden eyes glowing faintly behind the visor. You speak as though you have worn such a burden yourself. Marcus gave a small nod. In a way, yes. Humans wear invisible armor every day. Some of us act tough to hide fear. Some of us smile even when we're breaking inside. Some pretend to know everything, just so others don't see how lost they are. We may not have metal plates or glowing visors, but we hide too. And it's just as heavy. For the first time, Kaylira was quiet, not because she had nothing to say, but because she was listening with full attention. The hall was still, the silence broken only by the low hum of Illyrian energy pulsing through the walls. After a long pause, she spoke again. When I was a child, my tutors told me I was born to lead, that I must never stumble, never falter, never reveal fear. I trained harder than others, I fought longer, I endured pain in silence. And over time, I forgot what it felt like to be ordinary. Perhaps I never knew it all. Marcus felt the weight of her confession. She was not just an alien princess. She was someone raised in a cage of expectations, hidden behind layers of shining steel. He leaned forward, his tone gentle. Maybe that's why you asked me that question the first day, when you said, curious what's beneath my armor. Maybe you wanted someone to see past the metal, not as a princess, not as a symbol, just as Kaylira. Her visor dimmed again, but this time it was not in thought. It was as if the armor itself softened its glow in response to her mood. She stood slowly, her tall figure casting a long shadow across the polished floor. You are bold, Marcus, she said quietly. You look at me in ways no Illyrian dares. Part of me should find it offensive. Yet I find myself wondering if I have been waiting my whole life for someone to see me this way. Marcus stood as well, meeting her gaze. Then maybe it's time to let yourself be seen. She did not answer right away. Instead, she turned and walked toward the tall windows at the far end of the hall. Beyond them, the alien city stretched out like a sea of light. Kaylira stood with her hands resting lightly on the windowsill, her armored shoulders rising and falling with a slow breath. Finally, she spoke, her voice calm, but filled with something Marcus had not heard before, something fragile. I fear what might happen if I do, but for the first time, I also wish to know. Marcus said nothing more. He only stood beside her, watching the city glow. He knew then that the armor she wore was not invincible. Cracks were forming, not of weakness but of trust, and once trust began, it could change everything. The peace of the training hall did not last long. Only a few days after Marcus and Kaylira had begun to share their truths, the palace filled with whispers of danger. Couriers rushed through the corridors, their armor clattering, their voices sharp with urgency. Marcus overheard fragments of conversation. An enemy fleet was moving at the edge of Illyrian space. The long, silent rivals of Kaylira's people had finally stirred, and this time they carried the promise of war. Marcus entered the hall to find Kaylira already waiting, but she was no longer calm. Her armor glowed brighter than before, the lines across its surface pulsing with a restless light. Her spear rested against the wall untouched while her hands curled into fists at her sides. You have heard, she said, her voice heavy. About the fleet? Marcus asked. She gave a sharp nod. The Korath, old enemies. For decades they stayed away, but now they gather. They will test our borders soon, and I am expected to lead our defense. Marcus moved closer, studying her posture. She looked strong, as always, but there was tension beneath it. "You don't sound certain." Kalira turned sharply toward him. "I must be certain. A commander cannot hesitate. My people look to me for perfection." Marcus remembered their last conversation and chose his words carefully. Maybe perfection isn't what they need right now. Maybe they need a leader who believes in them, not just one who looks untouchable. Her visor tilted as though she were struggling with his idea. "You speak of showing weakness before a battle. That is not our way." "Not weakness," Marcus corrected softly. "Honesty. If you lead like a statue, they'll follow because they fear failing you. But if you lead like a person, they'll fight because they trust you. There's a difference." For a moment, Kalira said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of the choice she would soon have to make. At last she turned away and paced the hall. "You speak boldly, human, perhaps too boldly, but your words linger. I cannot dismiss them." The next day the council summoned her. Marcus was not allowed inside the chamber, but he waited outside the tall doors and listened to the muffled voices. The council urged her to wear the full ceremonial armor, to hide all doubt and stand as an untouchable figure of power. They reminded her that an Illyrian leader must never remove her mask before the soldiers. To do so, they warned, would be to invite despair. Kalira's voice carried through the door, clear and strong. "If my people see only the armor, they will follow a shell, not a leader. I will not be a statue of steel. I will be real. And that is how I will guide them." The council objected, voices rising in disapproval, but Kalira did not yield. Marcus, standing outside, felt a small smile touch his lips. She had chosen her own path, one shaped by their talks. When the day of battle came, the city was alive with preparation. Soldiers filled the streets, armor shining, weapons charged. The great fleet stood ready in the sky, a wall of Illyrian warships glowing against the dark void. Marcus, though only an engineer, had been given a place aboard one of the support vessels. He would not fight with weapons, but with knowledge, helping to disable enemy systems if possible. Before departure, Kalira stood before her troops. Her armor shone brighter than ever, every line glowing with energy. The soldiers waited in silence, expecting the familiar speech, expecting the flawless mask of command. But when Kalira reached the center of the assembly, she did something no Illyrian leader had done before. She removed her helmet. Gasps swept through the soldiers. Her golden eyes gleamed in the open air, unshielded, her face visible to all. For a moment the crowd wavered, uncertain. Then Kalira spoke. "You have always seen me as unbreakable," she said, her voice carrying across the ranks. "But I am flesh and blood as you are. I bleed as you bleed, I fear as you fear. Yet I stand here with you ready to fight, not as a symbol, but as one of you. If I can stand without the mask, then so can you. Together, we will not fall." The soldiers' uncertainty turned into a roar of approval. The sound echoed through the city like thunder. Marcus, standing in the shadows at the edge of the assembly, felt a chill run down his spine. She had taken his words to heart and transformed them into strength greater than he had imagined. When the fleet finally rose into the skies, Marcus looked out from his post aboard the support ship. Beyond the shimmering shields of the Illyrian vessels, the dark shapes of the enemy fleet emerged. The war was about to begin, and at the center of it all stood Kalira, not hidden behind flawless steel, but revealed, her courage shining brighter than her armor. The blackness of space stretched endlessly, broken only by the shimmering lines of the Illyrian fleet. Their ships gleamed like blades of light, each one humming with energy, each one a symbol of their strength. Across the void, the enemy fleet emerged, vast, dark, and bristling with weapons. The Korath ships were not elegant like the Illyrian designs. They were jagged and heavy, built for destruction. The distance between the two forces was filled with tension, like the silence before a storm. Marcus stood at his station inside a support vessel, surrounded by consoles and alien screens. He had been given a simple role: monitor enemy frequencies, and search for weaknesses in their systems. Yet he knew his part could make the difference between victory and defeat. His heart pounded, but his mind was steady. Humans had always fought with wits, not claws or armor, and he would do the same here. On the Illyrian command ship, Kalyra stood tall before her soldiers. Her armor glowed, but her helmet was nowhere to be seen. Her golden eyes reflected the light of the stars, and though her face was calm, inside she carried a storm. She knew her choice had shocked many. Some of her advisors had begged her to reconsider. Yet when she looked across her ranks and saw their faces, she knew she had chosen correctly. They no longer followed a symbol. They followed her. The silence ended with the first strike. Beams of light shot across the void as the Korath opened fire, their weapons crashing against Illyrian shields. The impact sent shudders through the fleet, but the lines held. Kalyra raised her hand, her voice sharp and clear through the command channel. "Forward, strike with unity. Let them see our strength." The Illyrian fleet surged ahead. There, ships released volleys of blazing energy, cutting through the enemy lines. Explosions lit up the darkness, turning the battlefield into a storm of fire and metal. Marcus worked quickly, his fingers moving across the console. The alien screens displayed streams of code, frequencies, and energy readings. He noticed patterns, shifts in the way Korath ships transmitted commands. They relied heavily on centralized signals, something Illyrian ships did not. If he could disrupt those signals, he could create chaos in their formation. "Kalyra," Marcus said into the comms, his voice steady despite the battle raging outside. "I think I can jam their coordination. It won't stop their guns, but it will make them disorganized." Her reply came swiftly. "Do it. We will strike where they falter." Marcus tapped into the systems, using both human improvisation and Illyrian tools. He adjusted frequencies, layered noise, and built a disruption pulse. The console buzzed angrily, warning him of overload, but he pushed forward. At last, a wave of interference surged through space. On the screens, Korath ships staggered, their movements no longer aligned. Their tight formations broke apart. "Now," Kalyra commanded. Illyrian ships moved like a blade cutting into the enemy's fractured line. One after another, Korath vessels fell, their heavy hulls breaking under precise strikes. The tide of battle began to turn, yet the enemy was not finished. A massive Korath flagship pushed forward, its size dwarfing the rest. Its weapons unleashed a storm that shook the Illyrian fleet, tearing through shields, forcing ships to scatter. Even Kalyra's command ship trembled under the impact. For a moment, fear rippled through the ranks. Soldiers looked to their princess, waiting for the flawless mask they had always known. But Kalyra stood unmasked, her face visible, her voice unwavering. "Hold fast," she shouted. "We are not steel, we are not shadow. We are heart and fire. Fight with me, not behind me." Her words cut through the doubt. The soldiers steadied, their spirits reignited. They no longer hid behind her armor. They drew strength from her courage. Marcus, still at his console, saw the flagship's energy core pulsing wildly. It powered weapons far beyond the other ships, but it also generated unstable surges. He spoke quickly into the comms. "Kalyra, that flagship has a weakness. Its power core is unstable. If you hit it in the right place, it will collapse on itself." Kalyra listened, her eyes narrowing as she studied the readings Marcus sent. "Then we strike its heart." She ordered her fleet to focus fire on the flagship's core. It was dangerous. Every shot drew heavy retaliation, but the Illyrians pressed forward, shields flaring, weapons blazing. The battle became a storm of light and sound, the void itself alive with fury. Finally, Marcus saw the reading spike. The flagship's core began to overload. "It's breaking," he shouted. A blinding explosion erupted in the distance as the flagship tore itself apart, fragments scattering like burning stars. The shockwave rippled across the battlefield, throwing enemy ships into chaos. The remaining Korath forces faltered, their will to fight broken. The Illyrian fleet pressed their advantage, driving the enemy back until the void was clear. The battle was won. In the silence that followed, Marcus leaned back in his chair, exhausted, but relieved. He had done his part. But the true victory belonged to Kelaira. She had led not as a flawless statue, but as a living leader. On the command ship, Kelaira stood among her soldiers, her armor glowing faintly as the fires of battle faded. Her face was uncovered, her voice steady but warm. Today we fought, not as machines of war but as people, and together we prevailed. Her soldiers cheered, their voices filling the ship, echoing across the fleet. Marcus listened to their voices through the comms, and he knew that something had changed forever. The armor was no longer her prison, it was only her choice, and behind it Kelaira had shown her true strength. The battle was over, but the echoes of it still lingered across the fleet. Broken fragments of enemy ships floated silently in the void, glowing faintly, like dying embers. The Illyrians had won, yet the memory of fire and danger weighed heavily on every soldier. Repairs began quickly and ships linked together to share resources. For the first time in generations, the Illyrian people had seen their leader fight without a mask, and the image of Kelaira standing unarmored at the front was already spreading through the ranks like a legend. Marcus sat quietly in a small chamber aboard the command ship. The room was far larger than anything he had known back on Earth, but it felt strangely empty. He leaned back, letting his tired eyes wander across the alien markings on the wall. He thought of the chaos he had witnessed, the strange mixture of fear and bravery that had filled him, and the weight of the choice he had made when he jammed the enemy's systems. He was only one human in a vast alien war, but somehow he had made a difference. The doors slid open with a soft hiss. Kelaira entered, no helmet on her head, no guards at her side. Her armor had been removed, and she wore only a simple Illyrian robe that shimmered softly in the ship's light. Marcus was almost surprised. She looked smaller without her armor, less like a legendary warrior, and more like someone who carried both strength and weariness in equal measure. "You are quiet," she said gently as she stepped closer. "Just thinking," Marcus replied. It was a lot. Kelaira sat across from him, her golden eyes steady. "You did more than think. You gave us a chance when hope was slipping away. Many of my people will never forget it." Marcus gave a faint smile. "I only did what humans have always done. Find the crack in the wall and push until it breaks." For a moment, they both sat in silence, listening to the hum of the ship. Then Kelaira leaned forward slightly, her expression thoughtful. "Marcus, do you remember what I asked you the first time we met in the training hall?" Marcus blinked, then let out a small laugh. "I remember. You asked me if I was curious what was beneath your armor." Her gaze sharpened. "And your answer stunned me then. You told me you cared more about the person inside than the metal itself." She paused, her voice softer now. "But I ask you again here and now, with no armor between us, what do you see when you look at me?" Marcus studied her carefully. She was no longer the distant princess wrapped in layers of steel and expectation. She was simply Kelaira, a leader who had bared her doubts and her courage to both her people and to him. He thought of everything they had shared, the sparring, the talks, the battle, and the fire in her voice when she led her fleet. He finally spoke, his words calm but strong. "I see someone brave enough to be real. That is rarer than any armor." The word struck her deeply. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment she looked as if she could not find a reply. All her life she had been praised for her strength, her skill, her perfection in battle. No one had ever told her that her greatest power was in showing her true self. She lowered her head, not in shame but in quiet acceptance. "Brave enough to be real," she repeated softly. "Perhaps that is the strength my people have always needed most." Marcus gave a small nod. "Armor protects the body, but it can also trap the heart. Taking it off doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Or at least it makes you something every species can understand." Kelaira's lips curved into a rare smile, gentle and unguarded. "You speak as though you were born to teach leaders, and yet, you are only one human among billions." "That's the point," Marcus said, leaning back. Humans are nothing special, not really. We don't have claws or armor. But what makes us strong is that we keep going, even when the odds say we shouldn't. We don't need to be flawless. We just need to be real. The chamber grew quiet again, but this time it was not heavy. It was peaceful. Kalira rose to her feet, her robe flowing softly, and looked down at him with a gaze filled not with royal distance but with respect. "You have given me more than victory, Marcus," she said. "You have given me truth. My people will see me differently now, and I will lead them not from behind walls of steel but beside them. And for that I owe you more than words can repay." Marcus stood as well, meeting her eyes without hesitation. "You don't owe me anything, just keep being real, that's more than enough." When she turned to leave, Marcus saw something new in her, an ease, a freedom she had not carried before. She was still the princess, still the warrior, still the leader of a mighty people. But now she was also Kalira, someone who had learned the value of being seen without armor. As the ship carried them both through the quiet stars, Marcus knew that humanity's place among the Illyrians had changed forever, not because of weapons or technology, but because a human had shown that strength is not found in steel, but in honesty, courage, and heart. And somewhere deep inside, Kalira carried his words with her, that the truest power was not to look untouchable, but to be brave enough to be real.